When Zeno of Cyprus was shipwrecked and stranded in Athens, he did not expect anything good to happen. Having lost everything and with nothing else to do, Zeno went to a bookshop and was quickly taken in by the teachings of Socrates. After studying with the great philosophers of his time, he decided to pass on his wisdom to anyone who would listen. Thus, the philosophy of Stoicism was born. Zeno's teachings spread quickly and were adopted by slaves and kings alike. As he later joked, "I had a successful voyage when I was shipwrecked." But the story of Stoicism does not end there. Centuries later, the philosophy is still just as relevant, if not more so, in modern society. These Stoic practices will help us bring calm to the chaos of today. 1. Develop an inner locus of control. Man is not disturbed by things, but by the views he has of them. Epictetus. Much of what happens in life is out of our control. The Stoics recognized this undeniable truth and focused instead on what they could do. Born a slave, Epictetus seemingly had no reason to believe that he could control anything. He was permanently crippled by a broken leg inflicted by his master. Epictetus would live and die in poverty. But that was not what Epictetus thought. He would say that even though his property and even his body were not under his control, his opinions, desires, and dislikes were still his own. That was something he owned. It's easy to be frustrated today. We are so used to convenience that even the slightest inconvenience provokes indignation in use. When the internet takes a second longer than it should, or when traffic stalls for a minute, the natural instinct is annoyance, if not anger. But it's not these glitches that make us unhappy. The unhappiness stems from the emotional response we have chosen. It is up to us to ensure that we do not allow external events to influence our inner state of mind. Once we internalize this, we realize that we have the power to be happy, regardless of our circumstances. 2. Preserve your time. We are stingy with possessions and money, but think too little of wasting time, the thing in which we should all be the greatest misers. Seneca. The Stoics knew that time is our greatest asset. Unlike all other material goods, time, once lost, can never be regained. We must therefore endeavor to waste as little of it as possible. Those who waste this scarce resource on trivia or entertainment will find that they end up with nothing to show for it. The habit of putting things off will take its revenge. Tomorrow is not guaranteed. On the other hand, those who voluntarily give away their time to others will also realize that they are no better than those who waste it. Most of us, too, easily allow people and other commitments to take up our time. We make commitments without thinking carefully about what they entail. Calendars and schedules should actually help us. We should not become a slave to them. Regardless of which end of the spectrum we fall on, time is of the essence. We think we have plenty of time, but in reality we don't. 3. Don't outsource your happiness. I have often wondered how it is that every man loves himself more than all other men, and yet attaches less importance to his own opinion of himself than to the opinion of others. Marcus Aurelius. Much of what we do stems from our primal need to be liked and accepted by others. In the past, rejection by our social group had serious consequences. It would probably have meant banishment and eventually death in the wilderness. To a certain extent, this is still true today. But how much time and effort do we spend to win the approval of others? What does it cost us? We spend money. We don't have to buy fancy things we don't need to impress someone we don't care about. Our career or lifestyle choices are about how others perceive us, not what's best for us. We are held hostage and pay a high ransom every day with no guarantee that we will ever be free. In contrast, the Roman statesman Cato tried to lead a life that was independent of the opinion of others. He wore the most outlandish clothes and walked the streets without shoes. In this way, he became accustomed to being ashamed only of that which deserves shame, and to despising all other kinds of shame. This was the only way he could stand up to Julius Caesar, who in his opinion was amassing too much power. It enabled him to make the big decisions when it mattered, without fear of disapproval. We have a lot to learn from him. It is much better for us to live life on our own terms and ignore the opinions of others. Happiness should never be outsourced. 4. Stay focused when faced with distractions. If a man knows not to what port he sails, no wind is favorable. Seneca. Modern capitalism has given us an abundance of options. Whether it's food, travel, or entertainment, we have many more options than our predecessors. But this has not been good for us. When we have so many choices, we become paralyzed by indecision. This is known as the paradox of choice. Our brains have not been able to keep up with modern advances and are overwhelmed when faced with so much information. Because it is so difficult to make a decision, we prefer to stick with the status quo. This is one of the core problems we face in our daily lives. With so many options, we never really settle on one path. Either we put off making a decision or we pursue several activities at once. The result is that we never really make progress in anything. The Stoics emphasize the need for purposeful action. We need to make sure that we are not just reacting to our circumstances, but living consciously. 5. Throw away ego and vanity. Throw away your conceited opinions, for it is impossible for a man to begin to learn what he thinks he already knows. Epictetus. One of the greatest frustrations Epictetus experienced as a teacher was the fact that his students claimed to want to be taught, but secretly believed they already knew everything. All teachers know this pain, and most of us would recognize it. At its core, it's about ego and arrogance. We believe that we have learned enough and are better than our contemporaries. Nowhere is such thinking more dangerous than today. Not only is today's information insufficient to solve tomorrow's problems, it can also be an obstacle to sharper thinking. We are in an age where we are just one step away from being overturned in virtually every industry. Even in ancient times, Marcus Aurelius said, "The universe changes, life is an opinion." For this reason, today's most brilliant minds spend much of their time reading. They know that there is always something to learn, be it from the past, the present, or the future. We would do well to do the same. Always remain a student. 6. Summarize your thoughts in writing. No man ever became wise by chance. Seneca. Of the many things we can do on a daily basis, none is as important as looking inward. The act of self-reflection forces us to question ourselves and examine our own assumptions about the world. In doing so, we have found the answers to some of the world's biggest questions. Keeping a journal remains one of the most effective ways to promote mindfulness. It fosters creativity, increases gratitude, and also serves as therapy. The benefits are numerous. Your thoughts and feelings become clearer as you write than they are in your head. The Stoics were aware of this. The most powerful man in the Roman Empire, Marcus Aurelius, dutifully took the time to write down his observations and feelings, whether in war or peace. This is what we know today as meditations. While today everyone from athletes to entrepreneurs benefit from the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius, it is clear that the greatest beneficiary of his writing and thinking was himself. The clarity of thought and accountability that his diary brought kept him virtuous, whereas anyone else in his position would likely have erred and become a tyrant. Take the time to keep a diary. It's not hard, and the rewards are immense. 7. Stand your ground. By doing nothing, one learns to do evil. Cato. In a profession often based on compromise, Cato was stubborn and steadfast in his convictions. He was taught that there are no shades of gray. All virtues were one and the same virtue, and all vices were one and the same vice. This seems to be an unreasonably high standard. It is undeniable that many achievements have only become possible through compromise. Yet it seems that the pendulum has swung too far today. We are abandoning our principles in the name of tolerance or profit. Cato unjared both his political allies and his enemies because he simply refused to compromise. He demanded that his friends and family take the same stance, leaving no room for any flexibility. But adhering to this impossible norm also gave him unshakable authority, so he automatically became Rome's moral arbiter of right and wrong. We can't all be like him, but we can learn a lesson from this. If you stand for nothing, you will fall for everything. 8. Imagine the worst thing that could happen. To the wise nothing happens, contrary to expectation. Seneca. Much has been said recently about the power of positive thinking. We are taught that optimism and affirmations are the key to a happier life. But the Stoics didn't believe that. They believed that this practice invites passivity in our daily lives. It encourages us to simply hope that things will get better instead of taking concrete action. Instead of denying the harsh realities of life, they chose to embrace them. They regularly carried out an exercise known as premeditation malorum, which translates as premonition of evil. The aim was to imagine the worst events that could happen to them. For some, it was loss of reputation. For others, it was financial ruin and poverty. What they all had in common, however, was the possibility of death. What would it look like if everything went wrong tomorrow? How would I cope with this situation? Would it change my life today? These were some of the questions they asked themselves. The exercise always brought valuable insights. The Stoics took precautions to ensure that the undesirable outcome would not happen. Even if it did not work out, they lived better because they had thought about how they would survive the adversity they faced. We should be brutally honest with ourselves and not be afraid to face reality. In this way, we can best prepare ourselves for success and be prepared for failure. 9. Remember that nothing endures. Alexander the Great and his muleteer both died, and the same thing happened to both of them. Marcus Aurelius. In the grand scheme of things, none of what we have accomplished matters. That is a sobering thought. We all experience the world as if we were at the center of reality. This creates an illusion in which our importance is inflated. We see ourselves as protagonists in our own story, but the truth is that this perception only exists in our heads. Everyone around us walks around with a similar mindset, but each of us is insignificant in the long run. Even the brightest minds like Edison and Newton would eventually be relegated to a footnote. We do not have to conform to irrational expectations and external pressures, nor do we need to chase after achievements in the hope of building a legacy. None of these things are permanent. All that matters is that we live our lives on our own terms. Only then can we truly say that we have lived a good life.